Well, let's talk just briefly how the human brain works. Here's our brain. Here's our cerebellum. And if you think of what's called the neocortex, the neo, you know what neo means? New. This is the human part of the brain. And this is really only a few cells thick. And so essentially what we have is the new part of our brain that lays over the old part, which is what we would call the deep brain. It's like we had a patient with a deep brain stimulator in clinicals this week. The deep brain. And this is the part of the brain that I like to call the bonobo brain. You guys know what a bonobo is? Anybody know what a bonobo is? Fascinating creature. It's the closest thing to humans. It's a monkey. It's the closest thing to human. And we like to study bonobos because they're a very social animal. They do only two things. They eat and they screw anything that they can. That's what the bonobo does. And so marketers actually in business really like to study the bonobo because that whole old part of the brain is present in humans still. We just happen to have a newer cortex laying over the top of that, and that's responsible for what we call cognition. That new human brain is responsible for cognitions. And we could just call cognitions words. So remember when I talked about cognitive therapy? Cognitive therapy is just simply working up here. When I talk about acceptance and commitment therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, it's actually targeting this part of the brain. The part that is non-conscious, which means it doesn't have words to describe itself. The non-conscious aspects of being. And the definition of a schema is structures that contain the individual's fundamental beliefs and assumptions. Schemas develop early in life from personal experience and identification with significant others. They may be adaptive or maladaptive. So when we're talking about a schema, I like to think of it as a worldview. And when we talk about personality disorders, that's really what we're talking about. The schema, the worldview, how you view the world. The only problem with this and the fact that it lays under the cognitive therapy portion is that schemas essentially are non-conscious. They're not things we put into words. We don't have words to describe. But the most common schema or theme, according to the book, we could say theme, that'd be another good word, that dictates your entire life. The most common one is unlovability. This underlying core where an individual feels unlovable. If they think about it in words, you might hear them say, they'll use metaphors to try to describe how they're feeling. But they might say, I'm not worthy. I'm worthless. No one could ever love me. I'm a failure at everything I do. And what that's called is the unlovability schema. And for the most part, that's taking place without us having words to describe it. So cognitive therapy helps for a lot of things, but it doesn't help at all to change what we call metacognitions or schemas, because for the most part, they're nonverbal. And so acceptance and commitment therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy try to work on this part. So how do we diagnose a disorder? A personality disorder, for example. The only way somebody is going to get a diagnosis is based on their behavior, what we can see. And the fascinating thing with dialectical behavioral therapy is we have figured out, last week I told you, once you have a personality, it's permanent and it's unchanging. But with DBT, we have found out that we can change people's personality disorder to the point where they no longer meet the diagnostic criteria. For a borderline personality, that could mean that they no longer act out of their unlovability schema. They may still feel that way, and they probably will, but they're not acting according to how they feel inside. That's the core emotion, is that fear of abandonment. That fear of abandonment. And when did this start to become a problem for us humans? This fear of abandonment, where we might lose the significant other, the one person. Psychologists have really tracked it down to that point in time at about 2 months, 3 months of age, when a baby recognizes for the first time that they are their own self. When each of us became self-aware. It occurred probably 3 months of age. Your mom's holding you, and you're like, what the heck is mom looking at all the time? Mom's always looking at something. What is that? Who's mom looking at? And then this little switch, we call it self-awareness, that baby realizes, mom is looking at me. Mom is looking at me. I am a separate self. Because the baby does not realize that they are two unique individuals until that point of self-awareness comes in. And so that's exciting and liberating and yay, freedom, but also terrifying and horrifying. Because now I have to make it on my own. And scientists think that that's actually where this all starts, that moment of self-awareness. And then what if this unique individual self that's separate from mother is not lovable? Mom is lovable, but I'm not. And now we've created this emotional dysregulation that can last a whole lifetime. Last a whole lifetime.